I love Stasis. It's my second favorite subclass next to Arc. There's been a decent amount of talk about the Stasis subclass recently, partially due to people calling for buffs, and partially due to Bungie promising both upcoming changes to Stasis and adding Stasis mods to the seasonal artifact. What is the current state of Stasis in the Season of the Wish? Is Stasis in a good spot, or does everyone's favorite ice-themed kit need some adjustments? Let's find out. Hey everyone, I'm Rizeki, and welcome to my design analysis of the Stasis subclass in Destiny 2. If you're new here, thanks for stopping in. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to get more Destiny 2 design videos sent straight into your YouTube feed. I also want to take a quick second to thank everyone for the recent support. We've finally hit 1,000 subscribers here on YouTube, and it's honestly something I never thought I'd be able to achieve, so thank you for watching and sticking around. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But with all that said, let's jump straight into talking about Stasis. Stasis was the first Darkness subclass brought to Destiny 2, and was released alongside the Beyond Light expansion. It was also the first subclass to use the new 3.0 subclass system, aka using aspects and fragments. Unreleased, Stasis was incredibly strong, and any PvP player will tell you the horror stories of shatter diving or Newell Grasp hunters running rampant in the Crucible. Over the years, Stasis has been cut back, and has begun to become more niche as the Light 3.0 subclasses and Strand were rolled out. There's been a bit of talk amongst players about the state of Stasis in the current sandbox. Is Stasis in need of buffs? Is it fine the way it is? Well, let's talk about how Stasis works, its place in the Destiny 2 sandbox, and what, if anything, could be adjusted in the future. Why is Stasis in the game to begin with? What's its purpose? Stasis is meant as our crowd control heavy subclass option. In a game filled with fast-paced gameplay and explosions, it's nice to have something a little different. Something that slows down the pace of the game and flips the idea that all you need to do is kill things faster on its head. Stasis was designed around the idea of control. Stasis slows, freezes, and shatters, giving players access to defensive and methodical gameplay. With Stasis, you are in control of how fast or slow you want to play. Maybe you want to CC large groups of enemies, maybe you want to cause AoE damage with shatter. At the end of the day, Stasis is unique to all the other subclasses in the game, at least at the time of release, and provided a much needed alternative gameplay option to players. Where in the sandbox does Stasis excel? We can start with PvE. The biggest draw to Stasis, and more generally slow and freeze effects, is the ability to stun all three champion types. Now, it takes a bit of elbow grease to be able to do it, but shatter will stun unstops, slow will stun overload, and freezing a barrier champ prevents it from using its barrier, essentially stunning it. This plays nicely into Master and Grandmaster content, where you're most likely to encounter these enemies, and also opens up your weapon loadout past having specific champ stunning guns. In addition, these activities have stronger rank and file enemies with more health, so being able to slow and freeze large groups can help you and your team stay alive, stall out capture points, and have a bit of extra breathing room. If you're a fan of slow and more thought out methodical gameplay, Stasis is a great fit for you. I would argue that Stasis might be the strongest in the PvP environment. Being able to slow and freeze your opponents gives you a distinct advantage in fights, since it is not only easier to aim, but your opponent can't move or dodge as easily. And heck, if you're frozen, you literally can't do anything. Stasis also provides strong area denial and zone control tools with things like Duskfield grenades or Bleak Watchers, so locking enemies out of certain paths or preventing revives is a huge benefit. It's no wonder that Stasis was so strong in PvP when it was first released, and is still commonly used today. Finally, Stasis is a great counter to Well of Radiance and Bubble, as shattering a target in a well or bubble will most likely kill them. This is the same reason that conditional finality is used a lot of the time. On the other hand, Stasis falls short in a few areas. Sadly, these areas are also key to the reason that Stasis is not as widely used as the other subclasses. In PvE, there are two places that Stasis falls behind. Number one is survivability. Each subclass has ways to quickly regain health or provides easy DR. Solar has Cure and Restoration, Void has Invisibility and Devour, Strand has Woven Mail and Banner of War. We'll get back to Arc in a second. Stasis has two ways to gain survivability. One is with Whisper of Chains, and the other is Whisper of Rime. Both have a fairly high activation requirement. Chains requires you to be nearby stasis crystals or frozen targets, so you have to initially generate the crystal or freeze an enemy, then you have to stand nearby without shattering it. And let's be honest, it doesn't take too long for this to happen. Rime requires the creation of stasis shards, and only applies a small amount of shield per shard. So unless you're generating a ton of shards, you'll only gain a small benefit from the fragment. Generating shards also requires you to kill frozen targets, and the relatively long period of time it takes to slow and freeze enemies can make this a bit more difficult to achieve. And it has a bit of anti-synergy with chains, since chains requires frozen targets to stay on the field, and rhyme requires you to kill those same targets. I'm not saying that it doesn't work, but it's much harder than just getting restoration on solar, for example. The second major roadblock in PvE is the crowd control. Stasis is the hard CC subclass. The goal is to slow and freeze as many enemies as possible. There's a slight problem though. My friend put it the best when I was asking for his opinions on Stasis. No CC is better than death. And with all the damage in the game, what's the point of CC locking something instead of just killing it? And this is a key issue with a CC subclass in a game like Destiny. Outside of specific circumstances, such as GM champions, since they have so much health, it's almost always better to kill the enemies instead of waiting on CC. The best CC is death, and if other options in the game let us kill faster than Stasis allows us to do regular slow and freeze CC, then it only makes sense that we would play more aggressive subclasses. I mentioned we'd come back to Arc. Arc only has a few survivability options outside of Hunters with Combination Blow. But Arc is so aggressive that you could clear out large groups of enemies with high ability uptime and Jolt, so enemies are dead by the time you'd need to regen health anyway. Arc has some CC in the form of Blind, but enemies are usually dead before they need to be blinded. Stasis has a very slow time to kill since it favors CC over time. If Stasis had an option that allowed it to more quickly kill enemies, or allowed it to apply CC effects faster, it would greatly reduce the time to kill, making it more on target with something like Strand, which can afford to suspend enemies before killing them. What could we tweak in Stasis to make it perform better across the board? I think there are 3 areas in the subclass that could be improved. Again, I really like Stasis, it just needs a small bump to bring it up to parity with the other subclasses. The first is in keywords. Stasis has 3 keywords: slow, freeze, and shatter. Out of all the subclasses, this is the fewest number. That's not immediately an issue, but the real problem is that slow and freeze are essentially the same keyword. Freeze is the outcome of slowing. Get enough slow stacks, and freeze happens. It's like Scorch and Ignite on Solar. Scorch enough to cause an ignition, but Solar also has Cure, Restoration, and Radiant as well. So there's other ways to play into the subclass besides just Scorch into Ignite. More keywords means more interactions, which means more builds, and of course that means more gameplay. The newly announced Frost Armor is a great addition, and if it works similarly to Woven Mail, it not only adds a new type of gameplay mechanic into Stasis, but also could help with the survivability issue. There may also be space for other buff keywords or debuff keywords to shore up other areas that Stasis is lacking as well. The next 2 areas are the 2 Stasis deployables. These are crystals and shards. Crystals are pretty solid as is, but adding more ways to create them would help improve the DR provided by Whisper of Chains, since more crystals means more places to stand near. It would also mean more things to shatter, which is the major AoE damage source within the subclass. Plus, making crystals everywhere and shattering tons of them is just really exciting gameplay, so even if it isn't meta, players would probably use it just because it's fun to play. Shards, by default, only provide you with melee energy on pickup. From everyone I've asked, and in my own opinion, Stasis melees across the board are kind of, well, underwhelming. No one really uses Stasis for the melee. The melee energy refund just doesn't feel impactful for this reason. Before the removal of elemental well mods, we had the ability to make Stasis shards behave like Stasis wells with the elemental shards mod. In combination with other well mods, collecting shards would give you energy for all your abilities, enabling a lot more possible builds revolving around shard generation. Bringing this mechanic back in the form of either a fragment or just adding it as a base effect would be a great way to make shards more useful. Other ways to improve shards is to give them some more interactions with the rest of the Stasis kit. Maybe collecting shards helps build up your frost armor or activates other fragments, etc. Tangles on Strand have multiple uses, whether that's for Woven Mail, explosions, or otherwise. Like I said before, more interactions equals better gameplay and more possible builds. Alright, time to talk about the main classes. I'm going to mostly be talking about exotic armor support since most of what I already said is the same as what I would be saying for each class anyway. Starting with Hunters. Hunters have basically 2 options with Stasis, Duskfield grenade builds and Mask of Bakris. Duskfield grenades most easily synergize with Renewal Grasps. There's honestly not much to say for this. Renewals are pretty good. They provide strong DR, good ability regen, and work well in PvE and PvP. The only possible problem here is the slow playstyle, but that is usually why you're signing up for Stasis anyway, so it's not really a huge drawback. What is kind of funny though is that a non-Stasis exotic is actually more commonly used than Renewal Grasps, Frosties. Because the grenade cooldown is so long, Frosties let you more easily spam the ability, so it only makes sense that they would be more common than Renewal Grasps. Mask of Bakris is fine in PvP, but in PvE it's pretty disappointing even with the recent rework. I tried to make a build with it recently, revolving around Winter's Shroud and class ability regen for quick slows and weapon surge for high damage. But the build fell apart because Bakris has a lock on ability energy while the surge is active. So the build literally just didn't work, and I was pretty sad about it. So at the end of the day, grenade builds are all hunters have, outside of niche other options. Big shout out to my recent Bombardiers build, that one was actually pretty fun. Warlocks I think have the best synergies with Stasis. They have the most optimal methods of applying slow and freeze, and can do it very easily to AoE targets. The real issue with Warlocks is an underwhelming melee, underwhelming super, and more importantly, an inability to easily shatter frozen targets and crystals. Hunters have Shatter Dive, Titans have their melee, Warlocks freeze a ton of targets at once, but if they can't kill those targets, there's not really a point. Talking to my friendly Warlock mains also reveals a similar problem to Hunters, where the only real viable option is using Osmiomancies, so again there's only a single build or exotic worth using. Having some more options and build diversity would help improve Stasis Warlock quite a bit. Titans are something entirely different. It's no surprise to anyone that Stasis Titan is the worst and least used subclass in the entire game. I asked again my Titan friends for their thoughts, and their responses are really eye-opening as to why Behemoth Titan is just not used. Quote, Stasis Titan is lacking identity. I've been trying to make Stasis Titan work with Diamond Lances for harder content, but there is a brain-dead, never-die build with Stasis Shards and Hoarfrost where you always have Overshield. Sadly, it's just not good enough to stand on its own when there's easier synergies to pull off that do more. Both of these comments revolve around the same problem. Stasis Titan is missing something that makes it exciting, worth using, and expresses the identity of the Titan class. There are two Stasis Titan builds worth mentioning, Hoarfrost Z Crystal Spam, or Cadmus Ridge Lance Cap with Diamond Lances. I've said in previous videos that Lance Cap is the antithesis to what a Titan wants to do. Titans like to be up close and personal, with big explosive attacks and strong melees. Lance Cap builds revolve around staying in one place, throwing long-range lances at enemies. No exciting movement, no big attacks, just sit and toss. And to be fair, it could be good, but it is missing the Titan identity. Hoarfrost Z, on the other hand, is actually really fun, and is a great example of ways to make an offensive version of Stasis if played correctly. Our second quote kind of exemplifies why it's just not used as much. There are easier synergies to pull off that do just more than it. Banner of War Strand Titan has easier synergies to do, is strong, and fulfills the Titan class identity better. There's no reason to play Stasis and handicap yourself when other more viable options are available, even if I think Hoarfrost Z is really, really fun. I, again, really like Stasis. I think I have the rare opinion that it's better than Strand. It's great to CC everything in sight, and has some really unique gameplay options that the other subclasses don't provide. It's strong in Grandmasters, lets you freeze and stun all enemy champion types, and of course, Hunters could Shatter Skate. That's a personal favorite, because, you know, Hunter main. But I can't deny that Stasis is missing some potency that is available in the modern updates to the other classes. Survivability is the biggest issue, followed by the power creep and damage from the other subclasses means there are just better options out there for almost any situation. Adding in some more mechanics in the form of keywords and improving the effects of crystals and shards are great ways to bring Stasis back up to parity and fill in some gaps in its gameplay feel. And finally, just give Titans some of their identity back and make it a bit easier to pull off build synergies to help bring players back to using the subclass. But hey, maybe that's just my opinion. Stasis is great, but needs some tweaks to bring it back up to parity with the other options. Do you agree with me? Disagree with me? Let me know in the comments down below or over on our Discord server. We are also raising money this year for Game to Give, so if you are interested in donating to help the Little Lights and earn some rare emblems at the same time, head over to the link in the video description to learn more. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more like it in the future. But I think that's all for now. As always, I've been Rozeki, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.